We think of water as something that comes from a stream, and it does. But it also comes to the stream, and our water security, how clean it is, how bad the spring floods are, how cold and abundant our summer water supply is, depends on how it gets there. A headwaters stream doesn't just move water. It moves sediment too, rocks, gravel, sand, and silt. Dead trees too. The power of moving water is immense. That power is most immense in spring, when melting snows and spring rains team up to bring large amounts of water off the landscape. Once the ground is saturated, water has to run off over land. It all ends up in the stream. And for every doubling of the amount of water in a stream, the power of that water increases fourfold. That's why streams often rearrange their channels. Spring flood flows are strong enough to move the whole stream bed and to wash away exposed banks. But the power of the water changes as it flows, decreasing in areas of low flow and increasing in areas of high flow. So most of the sediment simply gets redeposited. On the outsides of bends, land erodes. On the insides of bends, sediments get deposited. The new deposits of gravel, sand, and silt are important. They're like fresh garden beds for willows, poplars, fireweed, and other floodplain plants. The washed out trees are important too. They become new habitat and hiding places for mink, trout, and sandpipers. After the spring floods are finished, the floodplain explodes with life. The mosaic strips of green vegetation that line our creeks and rivers contain far more vegetation and wildlife diversity than the whole rest of the landscape. Inside the creek, those spring floods create habitat for fish, like the threatened native West Slope cutthroat trout. The powerful spring flows flush the finest silt and mud out of the gravel stream bed and deposit it up on the floodplain. The clean gravel allows cold, oxygen-rich water to reach trout eggs and nourish the young trout when they hatch. A muddy spring flood results in clean summer gravel because of the force of so much water and how it sorts and separates all the sediment. But a muddy summer stream is a different matter. In summer, there is not enough water in a stream to flush the fine sediments very far. The stream has no way to move that silt onto the floodplain. Instead, the mud goes into the gravel, clogging it and choking fish eggs and baby fish.
When you look at a stream bottom where there's a very heavy sediment layer, or the layer of sediment is entrained in the substrate, what you notice is all the nooks and crannies have gone missing. All the little interstitial spaces between the rocks and the cobble. And those are very important because that's where all the aquatic insects live, is in those little nooks and crannies. And of course, aquatic insects are the building of trout flesh. You don't have insects, you don't have trout flesh. The other thing is that once those trout, after they've incubated and come out, they live in that little bit of interstitial space between the nooks and crannies because they don't have to fight the current. They don't have enough energy to fight the current. In fact, that was one of the failures of putting hatchery trout in these streams. Most of them died immediately because they'd never been raised in a moving water environment, and they tried to swim and they swam themselves to death. So those little native fingerlings need clean gravels and clean substrate for those little nooks and crannies that they can get into out of the current.
This is a designated off-highway vehicle trail that goes right through a stream that's used by native cutthroat trout. So this is important habitat for them. And this, to their credit, the users have built a bridge that allows them to avoid going in the creek. And most of them are using it. So this is a really positive step. This is how you integrate recreational use, motorized recreational use, with protecting the health of the watershed and the health of the stream. But it's not enough, because if you look, the approach still comes down a straight hill and goes straight towards the creek. So every time we have a thunderstorm in the summer, it picks up any silt it can find on anywhere up that slope and drives it straight down that gully into this creek. So although the users aren't wrecking the creek, a badly designed trail is still doing damage to the creek. Getting it right involves diverting our trails so that they don't bring silt straight into the stream, and doing things like providing a bridge for the users to use. If you look, you can see how much silt is deposited in the creek here. This is the kind of place where cutthroat trout would spawn. But there's no way that they can spawn in this place, in this pool, because their eggs would be choked out in no time by the silt, and also by the occasional illegal users that drive right through here anyway, in spite of the bridge.
The thing about the roads and trails that we've been talking about is that as they intersect with the landscape, particularly as they intersect with this very topographic, diverse landscape, in other words, lots of steepness, they often cut across the landscape. And what these roads and trails tend to do is, as water comes off a hill, like that one over there, instead of flowing slowly down the hill, being interrupted by vegetation and slowing the water down, it then gives that water a chance to be captured in groundwater, the shallow groundwater that sustains these streams later in the year and throughout the winter. The road or trail cuts that drainage off. It intercepts that flow, and it turns it into a channel that the water then rushes down. Instead of being slowed down by vegetation, it just speeds up. It causes this erosion. We can see the results in terms of the muddy water down here. And then, because it speeds it up, it often increases the amount of erosion that happens. Actually, there's a bit of physics involved here. If you double the speed at which water moves, you increase its ability to erode by 4 times, and you increase its ability to carry transported material by 16 times. So that's quite a multiplicative effect. And that's one of the impacts of roads and trails, is increasing the amount of erosion because of that capture. Of course, the other thing too is that rain falls, snow melts, and it slowly moves across the landscape. But you speed it up, and you speed its delivery out of the landscape, not into shallow groundwater, but out of the landscape into streams and rivers. And that's how you enhance flooding downstream, is with that stream capture. And again, with 4,000 kilometers of roads and trails into Livingston Porcupine Hills, that's quite a labyrinth of channels that capture water, cause erosion, and speed it out of here. Now, the net effect is we don't need all that water in the spring. We need it in the fall, we need it over the winter. This fish certainly need it over the fall and over the winter, but if it's not there, because if it's been delivered out of the watershed quickly, it's no longer here to service our needs and the fish's needs.
Clean water and clean creek beds are how we'll know we've got it right. Leaving the spring floods to move sediments around when it's helpful, and the summer stream to flow clear and healthy out of well cared for headwaters.